Sometimes we think we have a sales problem, maybe a leads problem, maybe a conversion problem. But my guest today, my friend Doug Brown, who has generated $1 billion in sales for his clients, hit an invisible problem or an invisible ceiling for 9 years. Because every single time his personal income crossed $200,000, he'd unconsciously burn it down. It wasn't bad strategy, it was a belief that he couldn't see. And the thing that drives our numbers and drives our behaviors right now is actually the same thing. So I want to get into it. I want to unpack it. I want you to hear his story. And I want to ask is that if this show has ever helped you in any way, an episode, a thought, a takeaway, if you could please just hit subscribe to the show so you can hear the next one and come back and support me, that would be amazing. But without further ado, let's dive into today's episode with Doug. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. I am excited today. I am joined by a very special guest. I will get into his intro in a minute, but besides being bald brothers, besides both being veterans and him also living in my original stomping grounds, I should have hit record 35 minutes ago when we started talking because we have just been bumping gums and connecting. And so I'm excited about today's episode. So I would like to officially welcome my friend Doug Brown to the show. Doug, welcome to the show, my friend.
George, thanks for having me here. I'm so grateful.
I guarantee you by the end of this episode, some of my New England twang accent will start to come back out because I'm going to pick it up and start matching language. So I'm stoked.
Packing the car.
Yeah. I'll forget my R's again and again and again. Ironically, the military is what got rid of my accent.
That's
it
awesome.
was so thick, but I used to get picked on so bad because I left Boston and then ended up in North Carolina for 4 years. I had a Boston accent with a North Carolina twang. So I got made fun of in both parts. And then I ended up in Hawaii and deployed, and Hawaii neutralized everything. So now I'm just like, I feel like I'm accent free.
Yeah, like being from here, I don't hear the accent like I would normally hear it. So I agree with you. I remember my father when I was growing up, George, he said the word, hoss, right? He was like, cowboys ride horses.
Yep.
and I'm like, they ride what? Right.
Yep.
and he's like, yeah, hoss. And I'm like, Dad, it's called a horse, like a horse. It has an R in it, right?
And then occasionally I'll probably say the word wicked quite a few times.
Yeah, wicked good, man.
The wicked good was like the way we grew up all the time, and I don't say it much, and so it'll come back out. So I wanna dive in, but you have a long illustrious career, and I'm going to get into this in your bio in a minute. But I'm really excited to share and have you share today with everybody listening, because it doesn't matter who's listening to this, whatever stage of entrepreneurship you're in, however size your company, whatever industry you're in, I promise you what Doug has to share is applicable, because it's about selling and it's about conversion, and it applies to all of us. And if you're not in the business of selling, I don't know what business you're in, but you need customers to be able to build and scale your business. And so, you've had an entire career helping people with this, and we're going to get into your story soon. But for the person listening, if somebody was to take one thing, two things that you share today and actually like applied it, not like, oh, I heard it, that's a good idea, but like, hey, I'm going to try that, I'm going to practice that, I'm going to look at it differently. What do you think would be possible for them in their business, in their life, in the way that they see business?
It's a great question. There's so many answers to that question, but I think I'll give them the one thing I know that sabotages or drives somebody to be able to achieve. And it's going to sound basic as heck, but there's really two things, I guess. One is our intention. The way we think reflects, vibrates out, and people pick up on it. So our constant intention. And the second thing is, which is really the primary thing, is what is your truthful goal that you're actually trying to achieve? Because I've just had this conversation 3 times, twice today and once last night with friends, and they're not clear on where they want to go, truthfully. So they're fabricating it and blowing it up bigger than it's supposed to be. And, I've got like one friend, he's like, I got to get my master's degree. And I'm like, you have a master's degree. Well, I got to get an MBA. I'm like, why do you need an MBA? And he's like, well, I need the MBA so I can make money. And I'm like, you're in your own business. Why do you need an MBA and feel you don't? And then he's like, well, I always wanted to go get a prestigious MBA. And I'm like, okay, now we're getting closer. Why do you want that? Right. And then it turns out at the end of the conversation that it's like, he doesn't want an MBA. He just wants to make more money. And so it's like, I'm explaining to him, like, dude, you're going to spend 2 years of your life, $60,000 a year to get your MBA. And what is your intention? What is the clarity of what we're trying to accomplish? Because over those next 2 years, and he just came back and said, I'd like to make an extra $150,000 a year. And I'm like, okay. And then he had a different thing and then another different thing. And I finally said to him, I said, listen, brother, I want you to just go take a walk in the park, put a pen to paper on a notebook, like no digital, write it down. And I said, I want you to put at the top, what do you truly want? And I said, whatever sinks in, write it down and then evaluate it, because until you get clear there, I mean, we can build a plan for anything, right? But if we build the wrong plan, we put, 5 bedrooms in your new home and you only wanted 3 and it ends up costing you an extra $150,000 to build that house, right? Like, you're off mark. So to me, those are the 2 things. And I see this over time consistently, George, where people seriously, like business owners are like, they want to grow their company and they hyperinflate it because they think that's what it's supposed to be. And then they get the plan and they're like, oh my gosh, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I want that, but I don't want to do that. So it's like, I'm a big proponent of scoping people in, because you said the magic word in the beginning, which was, if you're not in sales, what business are you in? It's, I always say, look, whatever business you're in, you're in the client acquisition business first. And so when it comes to business, that's the big challenge. But I also find that's the big challenge in personal life. So they clear those 2 up. It saves a lot of time, energy, money, and effort for sure.
Yeah. Well, what I find, and I'm actually just curious on your thoughts on this. You just said this. By the way, I have to say, that was a 4-minute TED talk for anybody listening to this. I could do the entire episode just on that 4 minutes, from intention, clarity in a goal, a truthful goal, not keeping up with the Joneses, the hidden costs of not having clarity, letting other people dictate your vision, which is what happens absolutely all the time.
Yeah.
But I think ironically, the way that I see it is, you just said one of the biggest challenges is the intersection, or maybe the 2 separate worlds of like my business and my personal life. Same thing in my personal life. And I find that one of the biggest struggles I had as an entrepreneur is my business was a hiding place from the clarity in my personal life. Like, I was getting my validation from the business. And then I was sacrificing myself to build the business because I just wouldn't look in the mirror and what was happening in like my personal life. And the business for me is almost like the public kitchen, where if you look deep enough, you can see my either lack of clarity in my personal life or my crystal clear clarity in my personal life, because I'm exhibiting all of these behaviors in the business that are coming from that identity.
Yeah, without question. And that, I love what you're saying. The business is the hiding place. I used to do a lot of work in the training business, for example, right? So, or the training industry. And I've kind of stopped doing that. And one of my associates was asking me, why you kind of stopped doing that? Like, you got a lot of experience. I mean, you did this for like Tony Robbins, Chet Holmes, the owner of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, all these brands, right? And I said, occasionally they look at business as business, but most of the people that are in the training business, they're building a business to heal their childhood wounds. And the bigger that business gets, the bigger the fear gets for them because they realize like that's what's left. And
Yep.
if that falls, then what I have to look at the real thing or,
Hmm.
what happens to me. It's almost like their identity is so tied to that process, George, that if it crumbles for whatever reason, their identity crumbles and then they start making decisions from scarcity.
Yep.
And they start doing things that just are not intelligent business moves. And worse yet, the people that actually built with them that put their faith and trust in that whole process, those people start getting in a compromised position because it's no longer about logical business decisions. It's about staying away from that pain that they built the business for in the first place.
100%. It's reactive
Yeah.
instead of proactive. And then this is, if you're listening to this and you can see this from a mile away, because it's feast or famine. It's always more, 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 more. Like you think that the secret to scaling is, well, I have to add more. I have to add more. There's no subtraction in there whatsoever. It's just this constantly moving finish line. And then it leads to burnout. Then it leads to breakdown. And then the way that I see it show up, and I see this with all my private clients that come in, is they're sitting on a 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure business, except they resent the business. They're like resenting their day. They like don't want to wake up. They don't want to look at their calendar. And I'm like, those are just symptoms, right? Because there's this deeper picture underneath it. And so just to give context, because I could talk to Doug all day, but for everybody listening, Doug's been in this game, and I don't know how many years you've been in the game, but you basically created a predictable, reliable, measurable, math-based model for sales revenue growth. And you have a background. You did president of sales and training for Tony Robbins, for Chet Holmes, and I love this. You raised closing rates by 157% and boosted sales for product line by 4,150%. You've founded or built over 35 companies, generating over 900 million in sales for you and your clients. You've been featured everywhere you can imagine: CBS, Procter Gamble, Enterprise, and then now you're working on a new software that we'll talk about for sure. And so I also wanted to say that for everybody listening, because I don't know the number of people, but I could imagine it's in the thousands that you've interacted with, that you've interfaced with, that you've helped guide through this process to give some credibility and weight to kind of what you're sharing and what you're saying here. So I miss
Yeah.
anything like relevant to the story?
Not relevant. Well, we're over $1 billion now in sales. I can tell you that. So that's like
Congratulations.
my little ego kicking in, I guess. But it's, um, and it literally in group format or one way or another, it's literally tens of thousands of people that I never counted it, but I know it's certainly in the tens of thousands. So it's one of those things that I think. I heard Tony Robbins say this one time. He says, when you've dealt with millions and millions and millions and millions of people, you know, you just see it. Like there's
Yep.
patterns there. It's like it's impossible. I don't even think, not to bring Tony's numbers down, but I think after thousands of people, you start to see the patterns. And, that I guess that where wisdom would come from in that regard. So yeah, everything we're talking about. Plus, I had to live it all. You know what I mean? I grew up in an environment where good was never good enough.
Yeah.
And, so I had to deal with that level of the template of love that, we as human beings always try to go back and serve, even if we don't want to, until we're consciously aware of what patterns and things we're running in order to interrupt those patterns. We do this. I mean, I was just telling a friend of mine, who's a client actually now, this morning. It's like for 9 years, I used to bring my income up, drop it, bring it up, drop it, bring it up, drop it. And, back then I had some side business interests, but I was working for companies as well in the both of them. Every time I got my income over $200,000, I'd drop it right back down. And it was like a seesaw. It was crazy. Like I'd be sitting there going, why am I doing that? Like, and then what happened, George, was my oldest daughter came along, Rebecca, and she was just maybe a month old, and I was walking, and you know the area where we live. It's green, beautiful,
Yep.
all that wonderful stuff, right? It was getting to late fall at that point, so the colors had still turned, and it was just a beautiful scene out there in the scenery. And I walked up a hill, kind of like a mini mountain hill, and and my brain went, "Hey, dummy, here's the real reason." And it was like, "Oh my goodness!" Like I was just like, "Oh no!" Like I grew up in a blue collar environment. Okay, I always had grease on me when I was going through school because I was constantly working and repairing things. My dad owned an industrial machinery repair company, electricians, you name it. That it was that type of environment. It was almost like Goodwill Hunting, the
Mm-hmm.
movie. In the field, in the trenches of blue collar. And my oldest brother was a white collar executive. My next brother down was an electrician and a fireman. My next brother down, well, I love him, but he's crazy and he was kind of a criminal and, it made tens of millions of dollars, but ended up in jail for a long time. And then it was me now working a white collar job. But my parents used to say, and people around my family used to talk bad about my oldest brother. They used to call him a no good yuppie piece of expletive. And what I realized is every time I got my income up over 200 and some $1,000, my family felt like they were pulling away from me. And I didn't realize it until that moment. And then I was like, okay, uh, who's going to win here? The family template of love or my daughter?
Yep.
And my daughter won. Like I made that decision like very clearly, and then and this is why I said when you asked the question, the intention and being clear on what our truthful goal is. My truthful goal for my daughter was never going to grow up as I grew up, and she was always going to have financial abundance in her life, just and be around people that were, you know, always trying, or the majority of them thinking forward. And my intention was she's going to win. She's going to be able to do this and do that and do that. And that is my mission
Mm-hmm.
for this part of her life. And I did accomplish that. I mean, both daughters were able to hang out, go to Tony Robbins events, stay at the Palazzo, like stay in the fancy hotels with all the marble and hang out with, entrepreneurs who are doing, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, sit and listen to those conversations. And it's paid off for them in their lives. But it had to come from that decision and getting truthful about the goal and holding that. And until we learn that template of love thing going on, sometimes people are just running on autopilot. They can feel disconnection, but they just
Mm-hmm.
don't. They can't put their finger and say, that's it, right? So I do a lot of that type of work as well, in based with the math and metrics on growing sales and growing, finding hidden revenue, hidden margins in the business, because we can point that out. But if we don't take care of, like you said earlier, the business and the person, if they're hiding in the business, but the personal side is driving that, we can have millions or tens of millions of dollars sitting there, but people won't go get it.
Yep.
They'll
Yeah.
literally sabotage the process, which is,
Yeah. Oh, I
doesn't
wanna
seem
I wanna
logical.
summarize some of this and then ask you a prac app question because, I'm a recovering personal development coach, right? Like I spent a decade of my life as a personal
Sure.
development coach, right? And I never understood it when I heard it the first time, but after years of it, it's like, oh, let me guess. Like every time you have a new job, your boss is the same butthead. Every
Yes.
time you make a new amount of money, the same balance ends up in your account. Every time a relationship ends, it's a different person, but it's the same story or pattern. And I was like you might want to look in the mirror. And I was like, what are you talking about? Right? There's no way. And, for me, similar, like Goodwill Hunting was like my life, right? Social services, very young, like working multiple jobs at like 13, 14 in New England, and then, joining the Marine Corps to run away. But all that programming, the blue collar, the story, the all of it, it took me until I was probably 33, which right around when my son was born, to realize that I was so convinced that I was afraid of failure my whole life. But in actuality, I was afraid of success because I didn't want to look at the truth. I was so comfortable with that pattern of love or with that story that I'd rather stick to that story than be willing to like write a new one, because writing a new one was unknown. It was like, yeah, but what happens if I fail? And I'm like, well, you're failing right now, right? You're just stuck in this pattern over and over and over. And so I want to ask a prac question because I love this. And you have a lot of experience in this. And you said this very early on in the show, is like, you have to basically measure your day, measure your actions, measure your habits, measure your behaviors based on your intention. Like, what is it that you are trying to produce? And
Yeah.
then clarity. And you had shared how you had a friend or a client go out for a walk. So, like, for the person listening right now who's like, this feels like me, right? Like, I keep circling my tail no matter what I try, right? The serial entrepreneur, I'm on like my 87th business or my 67th offer, or I've changed my clients over and over again.
Yep.
Like, what is a tangible, practical way for them to go find that clarity or to start pursuing that clarity so that their decisions are from that right place or that new story instead of that old one?
Yeah. So the first step is awareness, right? So I'll give a very simple exercise so that people can, you know, um, just get a business card, like or like a little card that has something you can carry around, and carry around a pen. You can do this on a digital, phone, but
Pen to
it's
paper is better.
always. Yeah, I agree. Um, just the tangible writing of this, and so you get a business card. Make sure it has a clear back, like nothing's on the back. No advertisements or whatever. And when we feel that we have said or acted in a way that is not truthful to what we really wanted, just take and strike the back of the card with the pen, like just a little tick mark, like, right? And then if you get 5, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4 and draw the line, right? To get your 5th one. And just for a couple of weeks, anytime you say a big whopping lie, if you will, or it's a tiny, tiny little, like, you said you wanted to go to watch this movie, but you really didn't want to watch this movie. You were trying to appease someone else. Like, you know, or, you're gonna, like, you're running late to the meeting and you say, oh, traffic was really backed up, but it wasn't traffic. You slept in, like something like that. Just strike the back of the card. And then each week, count up how many times you've actually done that on the back of the card. And if you do this consistently for in perpetuity, what you'll start to realize is there's patterns. And these patterns start overlapping, because then you can ask, well, why am I striking the back of the card like this? What does I really want? And then so that will create enough awareness to start getting the things in motion. Once we got the awareness, and I'm going to simplify this, but the second step in this thing is you've got to interrupt the pattern that's actually causing the decision to go the way you don't want it to go. So that would be as simple as asking. So it always happens, I have found, George, in a feeling or a thought.
Yep.
So there's a trigger level, something that comes in, person gets a feeling, a thought. For me, it gets right in the back of my neck. I can always feel it. I can identify quickly. And once I recognize that, if I don't act upon that at that moment and try to interrupt that process, I'll just go down the habitual path.
Yep.
Right. I call it the why. You go and up the base of the Y, and then you hit something and the Y forks off. And at that fork, that's the decision-making process. So we either go down the left side, which is not what we want, let's say, or the right side of that which we want. Or worse yet, we freeze right there and go down nowhere. Right. So, but once we start identifying what that is, that trigger level, then just ask a question. And I'm going to give credit to Tony on this one. Just invite it in, right? So I've learned to invite it in. And then Tony came in. Tony got this question from someone else, and he just asked, "Is this thought even true?"
Byron
Like
Katie.
just something like that, right? It's enough to interrupt the process. And in sales, these are what we would consider pattern interrupts. So somebody's objecting. I object to this. One of the biggest challenges people run into sales is they start trying to run down that path with them to try to overcome it. And when you try to overcome an objection, a lot of times you're creating another objection, and that other objection is usually fear-based because the first one's fear-based. But the worst part is it's no longer about the original objection. It's about their objecting to you because you created the fear within them. So going back, interrupt the pattern, and then just ask a question once you get there, like, is this even true? And like, okay, that'll be enough to stop it. But I just go, oh, hey, old friend, how you doing? Welcome back into the thing. You want to watch television? I'm like, this is all going on in my head
Yeah.
when this is happening. And what it does is it gives you enough time, folks, to be able to now actually make a decision. So, because that impulse will travel up and go quickly into decision mode, and you'll go into action mode. It's super quick. And what happens is most of the time that runs up that why, and it goes because our limbic system is designed to protect us. It's a part of our brain. And what we need to do is get to the other part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which talks about reasoning. The challenge is the limbic system takes, well, it's already acted, because it's so quick. It's like so quick, and it takes the prefrontal cortex more time to actually react than the limbic system does. So the limbic system is the fight or flight or freeze or fawn type process. And if we can't get to the prefrontal cortex, which is the reasoning side of the brain, if you will, then what happens is we just go on autopilot and habit over and over and over. And this is where we look at people and go, every time something like this happens, they just do this and it never works out, but they keep doing it. And so we've got to be able to interrupt that process and then ask the question, okay, what do I want here? So if you interrupt it with, is this even true? Or, hey, welcome in, old friend. And then the next question in our head should be something like, okay, what do I actually want here? And that will give it enough time for the prefrontal cortex to kick in. Because what we don't want to have happen is if we keep using the limbic system, the prefrontal cortex, the reasoning side of our brain, actually will justify what the limbic system's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there we create that habit, but now we're going, yeah, but that's just the way it is. It's that way in my family. Everybody acts that way. I grew up in an Italian family. We all use our hands, that type of thing, right? And so what I've learned is to take that concept and interrupt the pattern, and then we can reinstall new patterns over time. And this is where, to your point, George, which I thought was brilliant, you can't separate the personal from the business because we are the business.
Mm-hmm.
And what people think is like in trying to do client acquisition, oh, I'm talking to the CEO. She must be really important. He must be really important. Because they're the CEO, I've got to act in a certain way. And it's like, you really want to be on a peer level with a CEO. You don't want to be an underling. And so the moment we do that, we actually lower our chance of getting the client from the selling process. So I know I said a lot there. And
It's so good. I wanna add one thing and then tie it together because if you're listening to this podcast and you've listened for any length of time, I am so repetitive with the models that I use and that I teach. And a couple key things that Doug said is that these patterns, these stories that happen on autopilot, they weren't programmed overnight. They've been programmed for some of us, like me, 42 years of this same conditioning. And so I can't do something once and then expect it to unprogram itself, right? Like I can't go to the gym in a day and be upset I didn't get abs, right? So there's this practice, there's this implementation. But to Doug's point, the most important thing is the awareness, right? It's to take it from your unconscious or your unconscious to your conscious, right? To catch the pattern when it's happening. And just to give examples, this could be in your relationship where every time your partner says something you don't like, you shut down and remove yourself, but yet you want connection. So the breakthrough wouldn't be, fixing it all. It would be like, hey, Doug, I noticed every time you say something, I want to run away. So I'm just sticking in this,
Yep.
right? Like it's catching these moments, or maybe you want this life or this body, but that 11 p.m. hits and you have that nighttime craving and you open the fridge, but you notice you're opening the fridge and you're like, wait, is this what I actually want? Like I worked hard all day today. Am I really about to mow my face with some chocolate cake? Right? It's pausing that pattern. And I love the distinction, the visual for everybody, the why. Because what I realized is that the reason that I was reverting to the pattern was because I didn't have a why great enough or a desire great enough to choose a new pattern until I had a
Right.
son. Right. So for us, when you think about what Doug has said, is like the first question is, what is it that you really, really want? Right. Because when you answer that question, sometimes it can become overwhelming. And I'm speaking for us because there's a level of responsibility, but there's also a level of work. Not bad work, but I want something different. And I've had this thing for 35 years. Oh, I'm starting at square one. And so, in order to have the desire, or what most people call motivation, to be able to execute that, you also have to have a why. Like, why do I want this? Tied into a feeling, not into a thought, like something that you want to feel, something
Yeah.
that you want to experience so that you can do that. And then you actually start practicing it. I love the call out of just noticing for a couple of weeks how many times I've gaslit myself into saying to my friends, to my family, even to myself on my vision board, I want this thing. But then 77 times this week, I chose the other thing, and starting to find that awareness, because to rewrite a pattern, you have to catch the pattern. So you have to be aware of it. Once you catch the pattern, then you ask yourself, like, what would I want in this moment? What would I want differently? And this is where I've talked about this on the podcast. It's not about intensity, it's actually about consistency. And it's not about perfection. It's like if you lie to yourself 51 times a week, but then you take action on the truth 53 times a week, you're two in the positive in rewriting that story. And eventually the scales start to tilt until you hit the next pattern. And so this is where the wedge of expectation comes in, that I've talked to you guys about so much, where it's like in that moment, it's not about this, I skipped the gym 7 days in a row. I'm going to go to the gym for an hour and a half right now. No, it's like, hey, I realized I skipped the gym. I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk outside and I'm going to hit my floor. I'm going to choose one new habit, one new action, one new behavior, right? I'm jumping on a call with a CEO and I'm nervous and I'm lowering myself. You know what? For this call, I've never met them before. I'm going to pretend like I belong in the conversation and we're equal. It's when you find these moments, committing to the minimum effective dose to break that pattern. And so I loved all of the things that you said. I just wanted to tie it together for everybody. So it's like, what is it that you want? You have to create the space to ask that question. To have that space, you become aware of like, where am I choosing things that when I reflect back, I didn't want to choose, or why did I do that? And you hit the base of that why, where you're at a decision point where if you stagnate, nothing changes. If you go to the old pattern, nothing changes. So when you find that intersection, ask yourself, why do I want something different? And what is it that I want? And then just choose one action, one behavior to do it differently. Because the more you practice that new behavior,
Yeah.
the more it goes through the stages of competence and becomes something you practice. Is that
And
a good
I'd like to
summary?
add, yeah, it's an awesome summary. It's better than AI. So, right. So I'll add a couple of things to that if you don't mind, George,
Mm-hmm.
because the here's the thing, folks. What George said about consistency is the key. So, like even the card in the beginning, if you just carried that for a year, right, and you just kept going and going and going and going, you're going to know all your triggers. Yeah, you'll know them well before a year. But it's it's not about doing this for a short period of time, then stopping, because what ends up happening is life starts to take over and you'll start to revert back, especially under times of duress or stress,
Yep.
right? So, and on the opposite side, when you're opening the refrigerator, I love with the chocolate cake, part, asking yourself, like you just said, like, why and what do I really want out of this moment? Right? Do I want to stuff my face full of chocolate cake? Knowing I'm going to, run my blood sugar up, not sleep well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is it worth the consequences or not, if you will? And here's the thing I want. So you got be consistency on both sides and in the middle, and
Mm-hmm.
practice, 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 and understand, just like George says, it doesn't happen like, this is one thing I agree with Tony Robbins and disagree with Tony Robbins. Like, you can change your life. He'll go like that in an instant. And I agree you can, but you got to have the repetitive patterns in that process that you have developed your whole life in the way you didn't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to go away. Like George just said, you go to the gym and you have perfect abs moment one, right? You're probably going to feel pain after the workout next day,
Yep.
because it's like, I just went to lunch, George, and I poured honey into a hot water, and I poured too much honey into the hot water, and I knew when I was pouring it in, I was like, oh yeah, which is getting to my point I wanted to get to everybody. And I poured it in, and I said, you know what? I'm okay with drinking this much honey, right? Like, I'm all right with it. Like, what do you want? And I know my head's going to feel fuzzy and too much sugar coming in too quickly. And that's the thing, folks. If you want to eat the chocolate cake, eat it. But here's what you don't do: beat the living heck out of yourself because you took the chocolate cake.
Facts.
Right. And because you are going to make slip ups in the
Yep.
process. And where I see people, remember, go back to intention. If your intention is to beat the crap out of yourself, you're going to find other people out there who are going to validate what you're feeling.
Yep.
And then they'll validate and you go, yeah, sure, I deserve that. Right. So it goes back to this intention thing has got to stay consistent, because think of it as you're a lake, if you will. This is the best description I ever heard. I feel you're a lake. I heard this from Alan Watts.
Yep.
You're a lake. The sky, the sun, is reflecting the lake. What you reflect off the lake, other people see and other people react to.
Yep.
So if you're playing that constant beat you up game and your language patterns, or you're the victim in the process game, you're going to find partners and relationships that are going to actually validate that, so you can feel congruent with who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to change that intention from, okay, I used to be the victim, but now I've taken control of my life, and I will, I'm now going to be the victor, or I'm going to now be the person who stays steady in where I'm going. And, I'm already there. I just got to keep doing what I'm going to do, and it'll arrive. It's like going to the gym, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, you'll see results in 2 or 3, 4 months. If you want to be a power lifter, you can be a power lifter in 3 months, but you're probably not going to pick up the powerlifting like the people who have been doing it for 5 years.
Yep.
So understand that consistency. But the big key here is, if you make a slip, do not beat the heck out of yourself, because what you'll start to do is undo all of that progress that you're doing. You just got to realize, like, oh, I made the mistake. Okay. It's not the end of the world. I ate cake, one night, but look, I had 41 nights where I didn't eat cake. And, I had a super stressful day,
Yep.
and, it's okay.
Yep.
But, if you're eating cake 42 times in a row, yeah, you're stuck in that pattern that we were talking about. So I just wanted to add those things to that, George.
I love that. And before I transition, I'm going to transition to a question to something that you had said earlier about sales. But I think, just to relate this to anybody listening, I think about it. I'm a really simple, right? He was in the Army. I was in the Marines. I would say I signed the wrong contract, but I keep things very, very simple for myself. And it's like, if I decide to make dinner tonight and I accidentally put salt in a recipe instead of sugar, and then I taste it and I don't like it, I'm not like, hey, I'm never cooking again. I'm
Correct.
never eating again. You're such a failure. No, it's like, oh, what did I do? How did I learn from this? I still need to eat. Let me go back in the kitchen and make a tweak. Or maybe I order pizza tonight and tomorrow I remake it, or even being a parent, right? Like I think about the millions of times with my 9-year-old son or my 20-year-old daughter where I've misspoken or I'd said something that
Sure.
I didn't mean. And then I apologize. I'm like, what I meant to say was, I wasn't like, hey, I'm not going to be a parent again. I'm never going to speak to you again. Right. And so we get to give that same grace to
Mhm.
ourselves, which I love. And Doug, I see a bridge here that I want to tie together because one of the questions I was going to ask you, because you have this background in sales and training and it's what you focus on so heavily, is like, what are the common mistakes that you see people making when it comes to selling? Because one of the ones that you talked about is objections, right? And joining the objection story with people and actually creating another objection. And another one that you had mentioned was levels, right? Putting ourselves one down to
Mm.
certain people, which just massively creates this gap of dissonance and energy. So, what are some of the other common pitfalls or mistakes that you see people make in your experience when it comes to selling?
So I, I want to give a couple of examples of what you and I were just talking about
Yeah,
that will lead into the answers to those questions.
love it.
So, I primarily work with companies and find hidden revenue, hidden margins, increased revenue, increased margins, and help them build growth plans and implement those. But part of the process is working with sales teams. And so I have a methodology that I've developed over the years. I used it at Tony Robbins companies. I've used it at all kinds of companies and had successful outcomes. And I affectionately called it the 2X. Why? I heard 10X came out and I'm like, 10X, if you can bench press 100 pounds and I'll throw 1,000 pounds on, you're never going to be able to do it in that period of time. But we could get you to 200 pounds easy enough, right? So I've just kind of marginalized the 10X thing. Sorry for those who have created 10X. But anyways, I had working with a sales team. There was a member of a sales team that he was making $140,000 a year in commissions. And he was last in line of all the other people. It was in a place where you could easily, not easily, but you could make $1 million or more a year in this place. And so I gave him the exercise on the card. And a week later, he gave me his numbers. And if I remember correctly, he had 127 strikes on the card. And I said to him, I said, this was not an exercise to see if you could be first, right? And he goes, no, I get it. And I said, well, what did you learn in this first week? He goes, I'm an effing liar. And I said, okay, let's try to reframe that a little bit. Like, you've been lying, right? It's a difference. So let's be, to answering part of your question, George, be careful of the labels we put on ourselves because we act as if. It's one thing to know that I failed. It's another thing to say to people, I'm a failure, because then we take ownership of that process.
Yep.
So, I'm an blankety blank liar. That's ownership. I've been lying is a different thing. So this is where I see people right in the beginning, because it affects the confidence level of who we are. And it affects the ability for people to trust us, and trust will sell more than anything on the planet. If you can be trustworthy, people view you as caring about what their issues are, that you're a bit compassionate. Those you don't see. Here's the thing. Everybody thinks they need all the sales training and I've got to have technique's good. Don't get me wrong, but the person who can demonstrate and be trustworthy, that they feel they have their back, will sell naturally anyways. And if you don't believe me, folks, take a look at children. They are the best salespeople on the planet when they're unfiltered.
Yep.
And so this gentleman in 1 year went from $140,000 a year in commissions to $2.1 million in commissions. And the following year did even better. And it was all to what you and I were just talking about, George. We worked on the triggers, we worked on this, we worked on that, then we worked on technique. So the other thing that I see most people who are not as successful in selling or in sales is, they don't know their ideal right fit buyer. So they're trying to sell to everybody.
Mhm.
Hey, you over 18, you got a pulse, got a credit card, that type of thing, right? And so we want to narrow down who our best buyers are, is who will buy from us, buy as quick as they can, pay the most, not a pain to work with. They're grateful, I'm grateful, right? Who and what do they want from a business return on investment and a personal return on investment of which I can deliver? You get super clear on those points, because this is how you minimize objections. When you're having those conversations of those things that they want on the business side, and as important, the personal side, objections seem to melt off because they trust you. They know you're on their side. And, George, you and I have been talking, just because we're vets and we have some commonality, I already trust you.
Mhm.
Right. And so you get farther, way down the line on a conversation. Now, the other thing is your intent. Are you there to help them, or are you there to sell them? Okay. You can do both, but which one's primary?
Yep.
And if you play win, 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 you win, they win, someone else wins, you'll always do the right thing. So when things like objections come up, you're not going to try to crush their objections. You're going to try to help them cross from fear, because that's all an objection is. It's grounded in fear, to buying confidence, which is where they want to go anyways. But you'll do it in a way that they actually trust you, and you'll ask questions versus trying to use some slick technique about,
Mhm.
matching and mirroring and all this other stuff, which, is NLP, which works, but to me, it's kind of borderline manipulative, right?
Yeah, it's the intention on how you use the tool, not the tool itself.
Exactly. The number one thing, other than having the truthful goal and being clear about who the buyer is, the number one thing, if people want to sell more, is they're deficient in their amount of prospecting, going out and getting new business.
Mhm.
Why? Well, no one likes rejection, right?
Yep.
That I know of. And so they're a little bit fearful, but when you are able to detach from that outcome, and you are able to put in what I call 6 ways, 6 or more ways, 6 new ways to gain business to come in, trying to make them high performing activities, the master prospector, George, will always outsell the master closer.
Yep.
Always. I've never seen it not happen. And I know from my life, because people would say, geez, you've done really well in selling or sales or whatever. And I always tell people, like, listen, I'm good, but there are people way better at actually sales, like the mechanics of the actual sale, than I am. But I can outmaster prospect them any day of the week. And that's
Yes.
how I'm successful, because what ends up happening is, if you have an abundance of ideal right fit buyers in front of you on a consistent basis, you don't drop into scarcity mode. And when you don't drop into scarcity mode, the other person realizes it on the other side, and there your confidence is up. You'll position as a peer to peer. And just to give an example that happened last week to me, there's a company, they're doing 7 million a year. And, this gentleman can help him. I can easily get him another $1 million, easily add another, 5 to 10% to the EBITDA of the company. But he's kind of being evasive, and he's talking to a friend of mine who he's thinking of hiring to help him with a small piece of the company. And he doesn't realize that we were connected. And so my friend's like telling me the response back. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, well, when you talk to him again, would you do me a favor? And he said, yes. Tell him to please remove any consideration that I will work with him. And my friend said, what? This is a 6-figure deal you could get out of this deal. And I said, listen, I'm talking to companies doing 30 million to 100 million, sometimes even more, because that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of my target market. And I said, I have so many conversations going on right now that I view him as a problem client if I take him on, because if I can't get the conversation in the beginning going, how am I ever going to be able to help this gentleman when he has to actually do the work that we need to
Yep.
do together?
Yep.
And so when we have the master prospecting thing going on and we're talking to an abundance of people, we never worry about whether or not we're going to actually close the sale or not, because you know it's in the numbers that you're going to close them anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are other parts of the process, but those three, if people just practice those three and just said, hey, you know what, today I'm going to reach out to 20 new people, and then another way of 20 new people, and then I'll follow up with 20 new people. And they just kept that 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20 going. In about 2 months, it'll drop down to like 50 because they can't they can't prospect enough at
Yep.
that point, and they'll just have so many people to talk to, and business will just come in. And then, you can work on the closing skills and things like that as you go along. But the majority of the drop I see is on the front end of the process, not the mid and back end. Yes, there's drop there. Yes, we can tighten up follow up. Yes, we can tighten up closing skills. Yes, we can tighten up what we say in an appointment, how we present, with all those things. But the reality is, if you don't fix the front end, the back end's the easy part.
Yep.
It's the front end that usually causes people the challenge.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing on top of it too, because the way that I look at it is like a master of prospecting is a master connector, right?
Yes.
And connection is emotional. It's not logical and it's not agendized, which Doug said, right? It's like, what's your intention, right? It's to connect, and it's 2026 right now, and the gift of AI is handling most people's logical processing and decision making, which is increasing the demand for connection and a teammate to be in the process with them.
Yep.
And when we think about prospecting, or what I call connecting, even when you're listening to this and Doug's talking about selling or sales, sales is anywhere where you're enrolling somebody into changing something about their life, their business, their habits, or their behaviors, whether they pay you or not. It could be enrolling somebody into following you on social media, into subscribing to your podcast, into getting on your email list, into having a conversation with you. And it will always be a game of connecting, right? And I think the biggest shift I've seen in doing this since 2012 to now is that you go back 10 years, it was like we could plant a billboard in our front yard and people would find us. Well, after
Mhm.
COVID and AI, what's happening now is people have billboards in their front yard and they're asking us to initiate that connection. They're like, hey, are you going to reach out? Do you care enough about me? Or are you actually invested in my growth, to Doug's point? Or is your intention just to get a sale? So that connection piece is finding that new way, practicing those new ways, and checking your intention behind all of it. Cause like, Bob Berg's a friend of mine, but the book, The Go Giver, like I live and breathe that book. I die by that book, where it's like my philosophy in coaching consulting is like, you have to win before I win. So like, let's just get on a call and let me help you. And half the time I'm on calls. This happened last week. And now I have a new equity deal in a company. Is he's like, oh, so how do you work? I'm like, we're not even there yet. How can I help? Like,
Right.
what are we facing right now? And he's like, well, go to market strategy, this new software. And I was like, you got an hour? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, get a pen and paper. Here's exactly what I would do. Here's how I would do it. Here's why I would do it. Here's how to execute it. Oh, and here's a template that you can use. And I was like, dude, text me if you need anything. And he texted me 3 days later and he's like, when can you get on a call with the entire team? We would like to offer you equity in the company. And I'm like, oh, okay. Right. So I think about that because if you think about it from like a strategy and tactic perspective, simple marine brain, you and I grew up around the same time in New England. I used to go to the mall all the time as a kid and I would walk around and I'd go to the food court and I would always go to the place to get chicken teriyaki samples. And if you've heard me
Yep.
say this before, I know it's like annoying to you, but listen to me because there's psychology inside of it. I would go and I would walk by 20 times. I'd take my hat off. I'd take my sweatshirt off. And then I'd actually have the money to order food. And the only place I would go order food is the place that I tasted the food because I knew exactly what it tasted like. I wouldn't go to the place that I hadn't tried. I wouldn't go to the place that didn't give me a sample. And when we think about prospecting or connecting, what we're actually doing is we're giving people a taste of what it's like to be in our ecosystem, to work with us and how they're treated before they ever do. And ironically, in 2026, every single time they go get transacted upon, sold upon, snake in the grass energy around them, it actually becomes more evidence for them to reach back out to you because they have an anchor associated with how you treat them and how you connect with them. So I just wanted to add some like gold on top of what Doug said to like validate and justify that for everybody.
I'd like to add one piece, two pieces
Please.
to that. So you said two critical things. So firstly, you're connecting to make a connection, right? And so you're connecting to make a connection, but understand you've got to connect folks in the way that they value it. So, we're at a place now in the first time in history, in the baby boomer generation, where baby boomers aren't actually running the company. The millennials are starting to run it, or the other, the generations before. Their mode of connecting is different than most of the older baby boomers. Okay. They don't go out on the golf course and play, right? They're expecting some other way of connecting. So you've got to look at how your ideal right fit buyer wants to connect, because if you're constantly trying to do the opposite of what they're looking for, it's the connecting part. It's hard to make a connection because you're doing it in a way that they don't see the same. Crazy little story. I reunited with some of my high school classmates, and one in particular, she and I have been corresponding. And I'm a type of guy who just likes to talk, and I write long letter, long form, if you will. And I was asking my wife and my daughter, I said, hey, I don't want to feel like I'm being flirtatious or whatever, and because it's not the intention. It's just this person and I really connect well, and we always have, even back when we were kids. And my wife reads it, looks at this, she goes, "Oh, no, 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 long form. Like, you're typing long form." She's going to view that as you are flirtatious. And I'm like, that makes no sense. Like, I'm just answering her questions. And my daughter goes, "Oh, don't know, Dad. Anytime a guy's interested in me, he will type long threaded messages. And I immediately know he's interested in me." I'm like, that makes no sense to me. And then I stepped back and interrupted the process. And I said, okay, it doesn't make sense to me, but it makes sense to the two women, right? So what I'm doing is conveying information in a way that I think is appropriate, but it's not going to be appropriate. So I changed up the style, right? So, and the second thing is what I love what you did, George, is people are afraid to do this, is you basically gave away the whole template plan to your client. And, Jay Abraham, those of you who don't know Jay, I would look him up. Jay used to say this: just give it away and the right ones will do business with you.
Yep.
And don't worry about it.
Yep.
And so that's what I find you doing. And it's okay to help people to a place, folks, where they go, okay, I need this person to help me finish off the rest. And you don't have to worry about them. The ones who are going to take it and run anyways shouldn't be your client.
100%. 100%.
So,
oh, brother. And I know we got to land the plane because we got a hard stop. And so I might have to do this. I'm going to like bully you into doing another episode if you're game for that.
no bullying needed. I'm grateful to be here, and I appreciate. I've very much enjoyed this conversation.
Me too, brother. Me too. And I just want to. I'm going to just speak a little quicker for everybody. So first place is, and I'm going to have everything linked in the show notes. But I would love for you to connect with Doug on Instagram. So I will link it in the show notes, but it's Doug C. Brown _ on Instagram. You can't miss him. He's got a blue check mark. He's got 1.1 million followers. Reach out. And I would share this with everybody. If you have a question, if something landed, if you love something that he said, like just take a second, break a pattern of not messaging and shoot him a message and let him know what it was. I'm sure he loves to hear it. And then Doug, if you want a minute, like just for the stage, I'm pretty stoked. And I know we didn't get into it today, but can you give everybody the spiel of Vibitno, which is like your new kind of venture?
Yeah, I've created it's a personalized, meaningful, relevant follow-up system. That's really what it is. Because we all, like, say we want to stay in touch with people, like especially in a business relationship, you go to a networking meeting. Hey, yeah, exchange cards. Oh, dude, I'll get back in touch with you. Well, I've measured this over a series of years, and it's about 13.6% of people ever getting back in touch with one another. And the reality is we drop the ball all the time on this, and it just results in a drop in your revenue. I've kind of targeted it between 5 and 15% of your revenue can actually be picked up through follow-up. So I did that, and then we put a tech friendly, tech dummy, if you will, CRM type process on it. And right now it's invite only. If people wanted to access it, they can invite, but eventually we're going to roll this out to the general public. It'll track and actually build relationships when you can't.
Yep. Which I love. And so I'm going to recommend everybody, and I'll link this in the show notes. It's vibitno.com, VIBITNO.com. And I'll link it in the show notes, but I highly recommend, because I'm involved in, I'll share this to kind of start to land the plane and wrap the show. Doug even alluded to this earlier. You can connect with somebody, but connections are relationships, and relationships require management.
Yeah.
There's a leader and a follower. And when you're out prospecting, when you're out communicating, when you're out connecting, you're the leader. And so, think about how many business cards went in your pocket that you never followed up with, or think about how many people you had this excited emotional connection with in an event, and then you didn't hear from them again, or you followed up too late and the spark was gone. All of those sparks in both Doug's and I world, those are the sparks that build and scale businesses, because that's where relationships happen. That's where retention happens. That's where referrals happen.
Yeah.
And so to live in the world that we live in with the amount of information, the amount of access, but to have something or a system that you can utilize to help you do that follow up is huge. Just like all of us dudes know, we forget dates all the time. You open your phone, you put calendar reminders in. Oh, it's my wife's birthday. Oh, it's the day we met, right? Systems are what allow you to execute the plans, and you can utilize them effectively to build deep and meaningful relationships where you're intentional and they care. So I highly recommend checking it out. And so, Doug, I know we got to land the plane. I'm going to have you back for round two. We'll get into data and found revenue and selling and even more of the stuff that we have. And so my one last question though is, like, if you could leave anything with everybody listening, right? If they forgot everything that we talked about, but you had the moment right now to kind of tattoo some wisdom on their soul because you have a lot of it, what would your tattoo wisdom for everybody be?
Well, if we hadn't had this conversation that we had on this, I would give them a different piece of advice. But here's what I'm going to say to them. Go back and listen to this over and over and over, and pull out all the overlapping nuggets that apply to your life, and then actually put them into practice, because it's the application of what we're talking about that's actually going to get you what you want versus the knowledge. You can have 5 PhDs, but if you can't put those to work for you, if you will, you're an educated person, formally, but your bank account's still not going to represent it. And so in this case, your life won't represent it if you don't put it into action. That would be my advice.
I love it, brother. And I'm just going to add one note that if you need help with it, if you want support in it, if you want to be witnessed in it, the biggest breakthroughs come when we're witnessed in things. Reach out to Doug on Instagram, reach out to me on Instagram, shoot us a DM of something you're applying, use it as built-in accountability, but make sure you practice it, because you have the ability to rewrite it and to go to the gym and get abs, but not in one day and multiple days in a row consistently over time. And so use this as your invitation. Don't let this become shelf help. Just let it become things that you can implement. And so for everybody listening, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Make sure you check out Doug's stuff. But this has been another crazy episode of the Mind of George Show. So you will either see me in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, we're out.